you posting something?
Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This is the late night edition, Parker and Drew. It's good to see you guys. Parker, how are you? Parker, can you hear us?
Sheesh, I'm back. Was that just me?
Yeah, it's like you were in the Twilight Zone or something.
Sheesh. Well, like everything just went gray and silent, and I was like, just hang out until it passes.
How are you guys doing?
I'm back. I'm good. How are you?
We're doing pretty good. Drew, it's good to see you.
Doing great. Yeah, we're
you got like the hat thing going. Like, is that to keep the hair out of your eyes?
It is. I've gone way too long without a haircut because I've been too busy. So I figured, it was bad last week when I watched it back. So we're
you just gotta fit the vibe like the rest of us, brother.
Exactly, dude.
Hey, Drew, I'm happy that you watched the shows back. I thought I was the only one.
I always do it. You got to self scout. Come on now.
Absolutely.
I hate watching shows I'm in. I'll watch everything else. Stresses me out.
So we're going to do a Bengals draft preview. And Parker, being a Bengals fan, you're going to be our resident expert on their roster. So what is the state of the Bengals roster right now, according to you?
Yeah, right now it's interesting. Just got through tagging T. Higgins, waiting to figure out that contract. I know Jamar's eligible for an extension as well. As far as receivers go, already got Joe Burrow locked up, got a rookie running back, Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle with a rookie, going into a second year, right tackle in Amarius Mims. Ted Karras got an extension, so he's got, I think, a couple more years left or a year left after this coming season. But then the guard situation, I think, was the biggest kind of gripe of Bengals fans last season offensively. They just released their right guard from last season, Alex Kappa, and then they have a rookie in not a rookie, going into the final year of his rookie deal, Cordell Volson at left guard, and then kind of the depth in the room overall just isn't great. That's what the offense is looking like. And then you go over to the defensive side, a lot of young talent in the defensive back end, but just having issues staying healthy, getting on the field, staying on the field. They brought in a couple of vets to play safety last year. That didn't go, terribly great. So just kind of looking to upgrade the room, but also they've invested a lot of draft capital, especially the early draft capital, into the back end of that defense. So kind of hoping some of those guys step up, but just hasn't looked great so far. We've seen good flashes. Obviously Trey Hendrickson's trying to get a new deal worked out, at least, a shorter term one, whether it's a trade or a deal with the Bengals. He doesn't really care, it seems like, but trying to figure out that situation. We got Joseph Osai right behind him, who's a free agent this season. Hasn't gotten too much run, has had some injury issues. On the other side, you have a guy, in Sam Hubbard, who could be up for retirement this season. Doesn't seem like they want to bring him back on the same deal. So it's looking most likely like a retirement or a pay cut. But we'll see how that goes. But both starting ends kind of in unique situations contractually. Then the backup DN on the one side is a free agent right now. And then you have Miles Murphy as the backup to Sam Hubbard, who, has looked good in spurts, but just hasn't gotten a lot of time on the field. So it's still kind of an unknown, but a lot of people kind of out on him early on just because they haven't seen a lot of return from the first round pick. Then you go into the interior, and that's another big issue for Bengals fans, where you have BJ Hill, who's got a contract decision coming up. And then behind him, you had Sheldon Rankins last year kind of paired with him, but didn't really play at all last season. Now he also was released. And so you have Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson as your next guys on the interior, who were both rookies last season. And while they both looked all right, they also had health issues, couldn't stay on the field, couldn't get on the field. Kind of the same story you hear across, the defense. And then finalizing the run with the linebacker room, you got Logan Wilson, who's obviously been, I'd say, a top at least half of the league linebacker. I think he's a really good coverage guy, especially a pole runner in Tampa. But you got Jermaine Pratt, who sounds like he doesn't really want to be a Bengal next season. And then behind the two of them, pretty young, inexperienced linebacking room. You have some guys that fans are high on that have shown good flashes, whether it's in the preseason or, in spots throughout the regular season, but really nothing sure behind either of the two linebackers. So personally, I think the needs are interior trenches, both sides of the ball, interior offensive line, preferably guard, and then interior defensive line, but they're just looking for, honestly, just depth on both sides of the ball. People say, the entire D-line's a need because, like I said, you've got really three guys who you don't really know what they're going to look like moving forward, even if it is just for the short term. They don't look like for the long term. So they just need young, quality talent on the defensive line as a whole. They need to bolster this interior of the offensive line. You feel good with what you have in Amarius Mims and Orlando Brown for now. I didn't talk about tight end now that Ryan's in here. I didn't talk about tight end, but they really only have two tight ends that they're actually under control of, right now for the next season, Drew Sample and Tanner McLaughlin. Eric All was a rookie last year as well, but
love that guy.
Had the second knee injury, and then they discovered issues from the first knee injury. And so he's going to be out for a whole nother season. He's going to miss his first 2 years in the NFL, but right now their only tight ends are Drew Sample and Tanner McLaughlin, as far as I'm aware. Maybe some practice squad guys, but Mike Gesicki is a free agent still as of right now. So
didn't they draft two tight ends last year?
Eric All and Tanner McLaughlin, yes, sir.
Mm. And while we're on
but you don't count Eric All when you counted the two tight ends. You did not count Eric All.
Yes, because he's out for the next season.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
and how was DJ Turner last year? I was a fan of him coming out.
Looked really good early on. Showed really great flashes. Him and Dax looked really good as corners last year, but they both ended up getting hurt. I think Dax was a season-ending injury.
Yeah,
and Ryan can
Dax
correct
was
me,
my
but
next question. They moved Dax to outside corner, right, from safety.
Yes, sir, and it looked really good. Yeah. Looked really good. But like I said, I mean, they had Dax Hill, DJ Turner, and DJ Ivy all get hurt in the last couple of years, and so it's just been, like I said, like they have a lot of fun talent that you really feel good about. I mean, even a guy like Tyson Anderson, who's crazy, freaky athlete, but just hasn't been able to stay healthy, and that's why it's more like maybe we just got to keep bringing talent into that room so we can maybe move on from some of these guys that just aren't able to stay on the field. But that's why the defense, the secondary is kind of the fun conversation, in my opinion, because I actually like a lot of the talent back there. But at what point do you just have to start bringing in new talent? And then what are you willing to invest to really improve that room? Because you already have first, second, you have a lot of day one and day two picks back there. So what are you going to make happen with it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to me, a good GM will always draft a defensive back every year, right? Because you have like 9 of them on the roster. So it'd be great if 3 or 4 of them were always on the rookie team.
I just like
right.
DB and trenches. I feel like both sides, like your edge room, your interior defensive line guys, and DBs, like those you just kind of almost always want to be drafting depth there and rotating guys in because you just can never have too many at all those positions.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that in theory. Ironically, being a Bills fan, right? Buffalo has usually 9 or 10 defensive linemen on the roster, and they all play, which means that you can't hide somebody on the roster, right? Because they're all playing. So meaning that if let's say that 6th round rookie defensive end that you wanted on the back of the roster for the cheap contract, if he can't play better than a free agent like Dwayne Smoot. Smoot's going to make the team every year.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Buffalo's in a really weird defensive line predicament where, like, almost none of its defensive linemen are on first contracts. But back to the Bengals. What kind of tight end would, like, the Bengals want a blocking tight end? Do they want inline? Do they want a guy that they can move?
So you have a guy on the roster right now in Drew Sample that's kind of your fullback style tight end where he's your inline blocker. They even put him in the backfield in third down situations. They use him as a fullback at times. He's kind of that flex guy, that blocking specific type guy. And Eric All actually last year before he got hurt was a true like hybrid guy where he was a receiving threat, was used a lot on like slip and slide action, getting open that way, but also being an effective blocker in the run game. So he was really their true hybrid because they had Sample and Gesicki, which were kind of the polar opposites, where you had Gesicki, who's more of that receiving tight end, just a power slot. And then you have Drew Sample, who's a blocking guy. And Eric All was kind of the blend. And I think he's the long-term answer if they can keep him healthy. And then you have Tanner McLaughlin on the roster, who I actually really like coming out of Arizona. I think he's a great guy to have behind a Gesicki. I think he's more of a receiver than a blocker. But I think, if I'm the Bengals, I'm looking for another hybrid flex guy. If I can have an Eric All and then another hybrid guy that can fill in and just kind of be an upgrade over Drew Sample as he kind of phases out, and you can have two more hybrid style tight ends. That's what I would hope they go for instead of having this, consistent power slot style tight end. But that's what they seem to like. They have kind of their blocker and then they have their receiver. And so I think the Bengals are personally going to be looking for a receiving threat to replace a Gesicki unless they bring him back. But even then, if they bring him back, you still want to kind of push that guy out and have some youth fill in ideally. But personally, I'd want more of a hybrid guy.
Do you have first-round grades on Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, Parker?
I don't have first-round grades on them, because I only have 14 to 17. I have a first-round grade on Warren, but not Loveland. But I think they're both first-round players, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. So, Drew, where do you have Loveland and Warren?
So this week is actually one where I've kind of – it feels wrong, like in my gut almost, but at the same time it doesn't because I'm such a separation purist. Like I want guys to get open. The only thing that was holding Loveland back on my grade – I do have first-round grades on both of them to go ahead and answer the question. But the thing that was holding me back with Loveland is I thought he was going to weigh in at like 230 or even lighter at the combine. He looked small on tape. And Michigan had him listed at 245. I thought they were really inflating that number. But we can have some fandom conversations as well too later in this pod. I'm not a fan.
Well, and there's going to be another group of players I'm about to bring up. But
oh yeah, but I actually, Loveland came in actually heavier, 3 pounds heavier in Indianapolis than he was listed at on Michigan's roster. He came in at 248, which is a great number for him. And that actually made him jump Warren for me. So Loveland is my tight end one now. I've got a mid first round grade on him. He's really high on my board. I love Loveland. He's one of my favorite guys in this class.
Okay. So Parker, do you think those guys are scheme fits for what the Bengals do? Or do you think that while they're good players, they're not the right fit for the franchise?
I mean, I think pairing, replacing a Gesicki with a Loveland would be almost ideal, where you can keep Loveland on the cheap and move on from an older vet that you don't really know how much more gas he has left in the tank. But, like I said, I kind of want that flex guy. So I think Warren would be better in the direction that they're headed. But personally, I don't think that they're in a spot where they can go at that position in the first round. So I actually have my eyes on a couple better fits, in my opinion, later in the draft.
Yeah, I was starting with the least likely, but then what would there be a tight end like Fannin or Helm or Arroyo that you would like in round 2?
I think an Arroyo is a very interesting kind of guy to look at, where he has the injury history still, and you don't want to have guys in Eric All and Elijah Arroyo who both have concerning injury histories, and how are they going to be able to stay on the field? Like, that's a bunch of problems you're adopting all at once in the same room. But I think bringing in an Arroyo to replace a Gesicki is again almost ideal, because he's a very similar player, but maybe even a slightly bigger body, bigger target. I just think that'd be a very smooth transition from the scheme they worked last year to this season.
And Drew, any other round 2 tight ends? on your board?
Arroyo is an early second for me. Again, I try not to factor medicals into my grades too much because I don't have reliable information on that kind of stuff. And I loved Arroyo's tape. I think he's more than worthy of that pick. There's kind of a steep drop off for me there. Helm is like a mid to late third for me right now. There's stuff to like, but I think he's got a lot of stuff to work on. And that's nothing to do with the combine, by the way, because again, I don't really factor testing too much into my grades either. And Fannin, I'm much lower on. He's like a 5th round grade for me currently.
Careful. So you might make Ryan Sparks' computer blow up. Why are you so low on Fannin? And by the way, Fannin, I'm here for it. I'm completely okay with the grade. But
we had a fun debate on this with Max Toscano when we did our tight end episode not too long ago. And I'm always down the debate about Fannin. That he's one of my favorite guys to talk about in this class because there's so many talking points. Fannin, I think my biggest problem is you have those like H-back flex type tight ends. But if you're going to be that small, you better be more than athletic enough to make up for it. And I think Fannin is just nowhere near that range. I think he's stiff. I think he's tight. I don't think the acceleration is not there. The top end athleticism is not there. So for a guy that's going to play as light and with the little amount of play strength that he does, you better be a burner. And I just don't think Fannin is. I don't think he's quite the separator that he should be at that size. I think the yak ability is nice. I think he could be like a really fun Kyle Juszczyk somewhere. But I don't think Fannin is going to be used as an actual tight end in the NFL. I just don't think it's in the cards for him. And I think he's a better blocker than he gets a rep for, actually, especially at his size he plays at. But if you look at his blocking it on the Bowling Green tape, it's just they only ever asked him to block DBs. He was never down blocking 5 techniques. They never made him block inside linebackers. Usually he was never sealing anything. He never had a difficult blocking assignment, I assume, because they knew his limitations. So I think it was hilarious. You watch his gauntlet. Somebody said he moves like a fast penguin. He waddles really, really fast. That's how Fannin runs. It's bizarre to watch. But I think he could be a fun gadget player, like I said, like a fullback, like Kyle Juszczyk type role. But I have a hard time seeing a path for him to be a starting quality inline tight end at the next level.
Okay, so I guess another position that you mentioned, Parker, is interior defensive line.
Yeah.
So in rounds 1 and 2, well, let's start this. The round 1 conversation at defensive line for the Bengals should include which players?
I personally think that, if I could pick my defensive lineman that isn't Mason Graham for the Bengals in the first round, it'd be Kenneth Grant. I know a lot of people are really high on Walter Nolan. I think he's been mocked to the Bengals a few times. I think you can
Where do you follow him? I gotta hear that. I don't think we've talked about him before.
Nolan's tough for me because I don't hate his game. I will say I think he's going to be off the Bengals board. I don't think they're going to have a player like him on their board as an option, personally. But I do like what he brings in the run game. I think he's a very stout run defender. I think he anchors well. I don't think he's a big penetrator, which I actually kind of like. I think he does a good job causing piles and clogging lanes. I do wish he had a better pass rush plan. I think he's a good interior rusher, but I think he'd maximize his strengths more if he was a pocket pusher instead of trying to generate pressure or beat blocks. I think he just has a hard time clearing blocks and getting off guys. I think he's just more run through your face type guy, an anchor in the run game type guy. And I think the Bengals could really use a guy like that, but I don't think he's going to bring the pass rush juice that, Bengals fans want out of an interior defensive line guy. And that's where I think Kenneth Grant clears Walter Nolan in that, respect.
Yeah, my problem with Nolan is, like, when that dude's on, he's on. Like, that motor is white hot when he's playing well. But you'll see, like, he'll have 4 or 5 game stretches on a tape of just complete disappearance. I mean, he'll just go completely invisible for like 4 games at a time. Mm-hmm. And I think you have a really hard time putting a guy like that in first round conversations, much less top 20. And that's been the main thing holding me back with Nolan so far. As well, I know he's had some pretty major character concerns, and he didn't do anything in Indy, which teams were not super fond of from everything I've heard. So I know you compound those 2 things, probably not a great recipe for him. And again, if I don't know if the Bengals have any like Brian Maffey type, like, thresholds for these. So if I'm talking about a player that's going to be off the Bengals board, be sure to let me know.
Well,
What are your thoughts on Derek
That's kind
Harmon?
of what we're trying to do here, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of going through who we think, like, for example, Derek Harmon. And the Bengals pick at 17?
Yes, sir.
So does Derek Harmon fit the defensive tackle, interior defensive line profile that you described at the beginning of the podcast?
Well, it's so hard, like, deciding, because, like, I feel like the Bengals have been very rigid, or pretty rigid, as far as like their requirements for edge players. But I mean, you've had guys on the interior from like Damata Pecos to Geno Atkins to, like, I feel like they've had quite the range of body types on the interior, which I kind of like. I mean, it shows they don't really have a preference. I mean, they had the DJ Reader, BJ Hill duo for a while, and that was kind of fun, where you had more of a pass rushing 3-tech and a run stuffing nose, theoretically, like the archetype. But right now the room feels very wide open. They have kind of an interesting mix of body types in there. And I'd love, if Ryan had any thoughts, as far as archetypes for interior guys, but I think that's pretty wide open. I mean, I can see them going for guys like Kenneth Grant or a guy like Aeneas Peebles. Like, I feel like it's quite the range. They have taken tweeners in the past and tried bumping him in or flexing him around. Like, I feel like they're very flexible with their interior guys. It's more the edge guys where they like, the 6'4" plus, the 250 plus, the, like, kind of, they have they're more constrained there and they like stay in that box. But we'll see what happens to the new DC. But I know that's been a point of contention for fans too, is being more flexible and getting more athletic on the edge. But as far as interior guys go, I think it's pretty open as far as I've been able to interpret.
So do you have Derek Harmon graded high enough to take it 17?
Absolutely not. So I would be fully out on that one.
I do, actually. So that's the
Drew, you do.
Oh, yeah, Harmon is. I flipped back and forth between Harmon and Grant because I like both of them, but I think Harmon is the front runner for that, like, group of DTs there between, like, the Tyleek, the Alfred Collins, the Harmon and Grant kind of group. But yeah, Harmon's got a weird build, man. You look at that guy; he's got super thin ankles and like a really lean lower half, but he's huge in the upper body.
Yeah.
It's a weird proportions, but he moves well. Awesome pass rusher. He's
So
probably.
let's play a little game. Tyleek Williams, Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon. Parker, could you rate them from 1 to 3? Grant, Williams.
Yeah, no, that's easy for me. I mean, I'd go Grant, Williams, Harmon. No second thoughts.
Yeah, and Drew, how about you?
Like I said, I think I'd probably lean Harmon first, but him and Grant are like really close. That's a tight race. But Tyleek's probably third right there, pretty comfortably.
Yep. And then Sam Teets in the chat, Ryan Sparks in the chat. If you have to go Harmon, Williams, Grant, what's your order for the 3? So this is an interesting thing. And by the way, so Ryan, this is not me picking on you or Bengals fans in general, same with Parker. I have noticed that there's a theme with Bengals Twitter, and that's you tend to grade players for the floor, not for the ceiling. And I don't know if it's just because Ryan.
That just means you're following the right Bengals fans, I think.
Well, but you see, here's the thing. I don't know if it's because Ryan and Parker know each other and they're both in my feed, or if all Bengals fans feel that way.
That's not the consensus. Right? That is not the consensus across at least my timeline. My Bengals timeline over the last 3 years has not been. It's very like people like I think we're more gravitating to the floor because there's like the whole uproar, like, oh, the Bengals can't develop players, the coaching's bad, like, or they're just missing on guys, like they just need to take safer prospects. I think Bengals fans have just gotten conservative, but then when these guys aren't hitting, like year 1, then it's over.
Grant Williams, and then he didn't put Harmon in; he put Parker in. That was pretty funny.
I'm on the Harmon island.
I asked when we were doing scouting reports between Williams, Grant, and Harmon, the grades came in really close. And the way that Owen liked to explain it, he says he's going to put Harmon number 1 because he thinks Harmon has the highest ceiling of the 3 players. So it's very possible that out of those 3 players, he says he could see Harmon being a very elite defensive tackle because of the athletic traits. even though Grant and Williams likely come in with a higher floor. He says, but I'm going to grade for the ceiling, and I'm going to put Harmon above the two.
And I guess that's typically how I go about grading too. So I guess it makes sense. We would fall in line right there.
You see, and then when you not just give the ranks, but you explain the ranks, then you begin to learn about like what does Drew like when he evaluates versus Parker. And that's one of the reasons why we podcast on this stuff every day.
Oh, yeah.
You learn more that way.
Uh-huh.
So would you take TJ Sanders in round 1, Parker?
No, not TJ Sanders. I actually don't have – I mean, I like this D-line class, but I think a lot of the value's on day 2. Like, I think as far as my day 1 defensive line players, it's a lot of edge guys. It's not a lot of interior guys. I think you have – kind of a handful that you can sprinkle across the first round, but a lot of them I'd really just sit on it till day 2 and just go grab a couple on day 2.
Yeah, TJ Sanders is one I've had a lot of problems with. Like that's just one I don't get with whatever.
The film's tough for Sanders.
Like, I see, like, you know, there's the pass rushing flashes every once in a while, but this guy is light for a 3 tech. Like lighter, like Elijah can't see light, but worse. And like, you know, I don't see enough. Like if you're going to be small, you know, like my Jalen Rivers comment last pod. If you're going to be small, you better be Aeneas Peoples. Like that's just and TJ Sanders is not.
It's the Peoples scale.
Peoples. There's a Peoples theorem for every position. I'm telling you, you just got to find it.
So, question. So I think Ryan Sparks. I think you were the one that I saw that had TJ Sanders the highest of anybody. Right. Wow. So Ryan, you have TJ Sanders as I think he's your DT3. If I remember that correctly.
You have TJ Sanders over Alexander?
Yeah, we didn't talk about Darius Alexander yet.
Right.
Yep. So now, so let's talk about round 2 defensive tackles. So Parker, who do you like if you waited until day 2 for defensive tackle? Which defensive tackles do you like?
I mean, I think I'm probably one of the biggest Darius Alexander stans in draft media this year around. I just like his versatility up and down the line. I think he could be a first-round pick. I wouldn't take him at 17, but I'd happily take him at 22, 23, which I know it's only 5 spots later. But I mean, if I got to day 2, I think he makes it to day 2, and I'd take him at 33. I think Darius Alexander is one of the best. I think he's got one of the higher ceilings for defensive interior guys just because of his flexibility and what he's able to do at his size. Like I'm just a huge fan of Alexander. So, I mean, put him on my board wherever you'd like because I love that guy.
So I have a question about Darius Alexander and how you guys make your boards. So Darius Alexander is 25 years old. Does that push him down your board? Because my opinion is that NFL teams are not going to take a 25-year-old in the first 50 picks.
I think that really, really often, and there's certain positions where I think it matters more. Like the Michael Williams thing, I think age might be a little bit more relevant there. But when you look at like a defensive tackle like Darius Alexander, I think age can be one of the most overrated parts of draft evaluation that people get way too caught up in. Because like when you're drafting this guy, are we really, really getting caught up on the fact that, hey, we might not be able to sign this guy to a 3rd contract? Like who are you drafting to sign to a 3rd contract anyway in the first place? I think Darius Alexander, you're going to get, you know, an awesome rookie contract. And, you know, if 29 or 30 is too old for you at that point, you know, you can let him walk. But Alexander there's so much upside there and pass rushing potential. And he's such an incredible athlete, obviously tested out of this world in Indianapolis. I don't think the age holds you back when the film and the traits are that good at all.
I mean, I know Fisk was like 24, 25, and he was a top 40
he came in
guy.
and lit the world up.
Yeah.
Okay. So just curious, anybody in the chat, if Darius Alexander is 25 years old, does that affect where he is in your draft board? So Ryan Sparks, I like that. The Bengals don't re-sign their guys, so we all.
That's what I keep saying. You're not extending him anyway. Go get really the best guy for 4 years. Just go do it. You're not going to keep him anyway. Throw him away. That's what I do with running backs.
Okay, so Parker, one of the other positions that you had mentioned was interior offensive line for the Bengals. Is there anybody that you like in round one at
Yeah,
interior
I
offensive
think
line?
Tyler Booker's still a first round pick. However,
Is that a hot take?
the concerns that I had with him before the combine were like literally if you went into the combine, you liked Tyler Booker, you left the combine still liking him. If you went to the combine and didn't like Tyler Booker, you came out with a bunch of reasons to continue not liking him. So I think I'm not necessarily too moved. I think I've probably cooled off of the take Booker at 17 train that I was on for a long time. I think I can probably stomach that again more in the 20s. But I think Booker's a great pick early. I think a guy like Armand Membu would be a great pick for the Bengals because he has not only the dual side flexibility as a guard, but he could also flex out the tackle because they've had problems with tackles getting hurt in the past. You have Mims who has an injury history. You have Brown who got hurt last season, was kind of playing through stuff the last couple of years and getting a little up there. So bringing a guy like Membu in, who's not even going to be close to being there at 17, in my opinion, I think he'd be a great add just because he could really help you at any position you need him. And he'd just be a great. I think that's the recipe to being a plug and play guy for the Bengals right now is just find a way to get onto the field.
Got it. And so you had mentioned Booker, you mentioned Membu. Did you drop any other names? Like, did I hear Donovan Jackson?
I don't know if I can convince myself that Donovan Jackson's a first round guy at this point. So no.
Okay. So even with Jackson getting some good reps at tackle for Ohio State was not enough to convince you to have him that high on your board?
I mean, I still think he's a true guard. I think it's nice that he has the tackle flex, and I would see like a Donovan Jackson being we didn't want to re-sign Cody Ford, so we drafted Donovan Jackson because I feel like they would have a similar role being primarily a guard, but if we need to, you can tune out and play tackle. I know Cody Ford got reps at tackle in both of the last 2 seasons, though he's primarily a guard. But I see them re-signing him for pretty cheap. And so if you bring in a Donovan Jackson, you're just going to have 2 of the same player on the team, in my opinion.
Okay,
Yeah.
So I lost track of Cody Ford when he left Buffalo. So he went to Arizona, I believe, from Buffalo. Where did Cincinnati get him from?
We got him as I think a street free agent, but it was out of Arizona.
Okay, so the Bengals are his third stop then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but he was a failed tackle experiment in Buffalo.
Well, like if you look at how he's built, like you should never have played tackle. I mean, if people think Will Campbell's stubby, but if you go look at Cody Ford and then tell me that Cody Ford's a tackle, I'm going to look at you like you're insane. I mean, he holds up. I mean, like I said, he's played tackle. Like he holds up fine out there. But like if you look at how he's built like a guard.
There's Parker being a measurements guy again.
Pull up a picture of Cody Ford. Big lower half, tiny upper half. He's just built weird. He's built like I don't know. You have to look him up. Hey, Jim knows. Jim gets it. Jim knows what I'm saying.
And to dip back on what you were saying about Tyler Booker, obviously I'm a huge Tyler Booker apologist. I'll keep that guy high on my board forever. Easy first rounder. I think Donovan Jackson's probably the only other guy I'd have in that conversation for first round, and even that I think is a little bit too rich for me as somebody who likes Donovan Jackson. But in terms of Booker's combine, I think Parker hit the nail on the head and phrased it better than I could about why I don't factor testing really into my grades all that much. I have a very small RAS multiplier. But I think everything is contextualized on the tape if you just watch the tape. Tyler Booker, what you loved about him was not that he was a great athlete. So going into the combine, if you're mad that he's not a good athlete, you never watched him in the first place. The reason you're taking Tyler Booker,
though. The drill was good.
And he was good in the drill. That's the thing. People watch, he didn't run a sub 5 40-yard dash and he's off their board. It's when you watch Tyler Booker, this guy is going to come in and you're taking him in the top half of the first round because he's going to come in as a day one, incredibly polished pass protector. And he's going to be an immediate contributor to your offensive line. And I think now the Bears just traded for Jonah Jackson from the Rams. So that helps the Bengals' chances as far as Booker falling, in my opinion. But
I just think, with the way the Bengals run their offense, like you're trying to get a guard on day one. Like you had the league worst guard duo in pass protection last season. People keep posting the meme of Alex Kappa having the Triple Crown last year with the most pressures, hits, and sacks allowed by any guard in the league. And so we had 2 Triple Crown winners last year. But I think you bring in a Tyler Booker, who you have an open right guard spot. I know you played left guard, but you can throw Cody Ford in at right guard, let Booker stay in his natural position next to Orlando Brown Jr. And then you have not only a massive left side of the line, but you have a guy that's going to be, like Drew said, a very refined pass protector. He's going to keep Joe Burrow vertical. He's going to be on that blind side and be able to be an anchor over there. And you can develop in the run game. The Bengals are turning into a gap. They're a gap scheme team now anyway. You don't need a guy that's going to be excelling in a wide zone like a guy's going to be flying around at the second level. You need guys that are going to displace defensive linemen, and they can climb effectively, but they don't need to be running around in space. You're going to be relocating defensive linemen on a consistent basis and anchoring against an AFC North pass rush.
So is Booker your dream first-round pick there, Parker?
Again, I think my dream is Kenneth Grant, but if Kenneth Grant's gone, I'd love Tyler Booker, man. I'd love Tyler Booker in stripes. If it's not Tyler Booker, I need Tate Ratledge right next to Amarius Mims once again. But those are if I could pick my interior offensive lineman, it'd be one of those two for sure.
Would you take Ratledge in round 1, or is he a day 2 guy?
I'm a lot higher on Ratledge than a lot of people, but I'm not taking him at 17. I'd like if I traded back out of 17, maybe even early into the second round, I'd definitely take him there. I think he's worth the top half of the second round pick. Especially when you have, a guy that he's already played next to in Amarius Mims that you could just slot him next to. I think he brings more value to you than another team. But I don't have him as a first rounder. No, I think that's a little rich. But
so if Booker's off the board and Grant's off the board, who are your next best first round picks for the Bengals?
It's got to be Jihad,
right? People love the Jihad Campbell look. I don't hate going for a linebacker. I think, if I'm going for a linebacker, I'd love pairing a Jack Kaiser with Logan Wilson, and you can get him later on. I don't think they really need to shell out for a guy like a Jihad Campbell. I think you still focus on the trenches. You just focus on the interior of both sides of your trenches, or you go get an edge guy on the defensive line. I think I really want a defensive lineman in the first round, even though I said there's not a lot of great talent. If it's not going to be a Mason Graham or a Kenneth Grant, I'd even consider a Darius Alexander or maybe even an Alfred Collins. I think it'd be fun. I think you can get him a little later though. So that's when you start looking at does a James Pierce fit? Is a Shamar Stewart available? I'd love a Shamar Stewart to pair with a Trey Hendrickson, or even, if Trey's not a long-term answer, you have Miles Murphy you can lock up for a little bit. You put Shamar Stewart on the opposite side of Miles Murphy. I think you can get a lot of production because they're both high pressure rate guys. I'm not opposed to looking at guys like Donovan Izaraku. I just, looking through this list, it's kind of, you just have to pick your shots. I think I wouldn't love a Landon Jackson. I think it'd be a weird fit. James Pierce Jr. might be, borderline. Does he match what the Bengals are looking for out of an edge player? Like I talked about a little bit earlier, does he fit the profile, or is he going to be off the board? I think Princely Uman-Mielen falls into that category, but I see him more as a designated pass rusher. So I don't love what he brings. That's why I kind of want some of these bigger defensive ends, because the Bengals like running every down guys. But that's kind of what I'm looking at.
At 17.
I'm low on him, so I wouldn't take him until 49. I don't think he's a first round talent. Yes. I think Shamar's a much better all around edge player than Scorton. I just don't see what he brings. I'd like Scorton more as a 3-tech than an end personally. I'd love Scorton as a BJ Hill replacement, but not as an edge.
This is hysterical. So I think Andy, I don't know if I saw you on the prior podcast, but Sam Teets was there, right? You guys are exactly the opposite on Stewart and Scourton. It's the Bills guys that I just podcasted. They wanted Scourton, didn't want Stewart.
I feel like
Stewart's like
Stewart, but not Scourton. It's
Stewart's like everything I look for out of an edge. He's long, strong, heavy. Like he's a freak athlete. Like it's literally Jared Verse, but athletic. Like I don't know why you would be out on him at this point.
This draft is going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, I can't wait.
Like literally, I think it's like the Tale of Two podcast, where like people are completely flipped on their interpretation of the players because they're looking at traits versus production.
And that's why you should start a shadow team so we can all compare our hits and misses together over time.
Yep.
But
Sam
I'm really.
G, are you familiar with what a shadow team is? Because if not, you and I will need to talk. And Parker is Mr. Shadow Team. But this is
like a banner.
We did.
Yes.
Yeah, we did a podcast on it a little while ago. But Sam, there's this thing called a shadow team, and it's a really good way to kind of measure our mettle in evaluation of players. So, Sam, I'll get you some info. I actually typed up a Word doc. So,
but I'm really glad to hear that Parker's agreeing with me on the skirting debate, because he might be the only person that's ever agreed with me on that. Because I
don't disagree with Sam. Skirting definitely has the better technical foundation, but I feel like his ceiling is just so capped. Like, I just don't like applying him to an NFL defense is going to be a little trickier than I think a Stewart. Where Stewart, while he's more raw, could be more. You can throw him in and he'll figure it out there. Whereas I think Scorton's going to be more of a pick and roll guy. He's going to be a role player. He's not going to be like an impact guy. That's why I wouldn't take him in the first. But again, that's just how I see his game.
I will say I'd be interested to see Skirton at what he came at 258, 256 in Indy.
Yeah, they both came in light. Yeah,
I'd be really interested to see how Skirton looks at that weight rather than 270, 280 what A&M had him playing at
270. Yeah,
because he was carrying a lot of bad weight at A&M, and I think that killed a lot of his twitch and the stiffness and the lack of bend, which is kind of what made me low on him. So if dropping weight that A&M wanted to have on there, if that fixes those problems, I might be higher on him. But I feel like he had super stiff, super rigid, no bend, and he didn't generate barely any power despite playing at 280 pounds. So I think just that kind of blend threw me off of him. But if he's able to kind of bring some of that athleticism and bend back in the 250s, I'd be way more in on him.
Again, I think he's just a classic BC gap tweener. Like, he's just a guy that's gonna I think if you make him like a 3-4 defensive end, I think it could be a fun life. Like, him and Landon Jackson might be two of the best 3-4 defensive end fits in this class, just playing that specific role. But again, it's just, does the team need that? Does the team want that? What are they looking for out of that position? So,
I don't want to steal Jim's MC job here, but the as far as Jalen is it Jalen or Jelon Walker? I don't know. But
Jalen,
I know he's the edge. Measurements probably don't fit with what you're saying. The Bengals but the fact that he's kind of that tweener, has that versatility, would that put him back on their board?
No, and again, I could new DC, knew them maybe. I don't know, but we'll see. But I personally have Walker as an off-ball linebacker. If again, I'm changing kind of how I grade my linebackers next year, are these edge guys. I'm sorting them differently so I can make more sense of it. But I see Jalen Walker as an off-ball linebacker with, pass rush upside and blitzing upside. But I understand that people don't love what he does in coverage. I get that. But I just feel like, you play him as an outside linebacker, even if you bump him to an inside linebacker, I think you have a lot of fun with him. Almost I think he's like a Jihad Campbell light at times, honestly.
Mm-hmm. You might not find a bigger Jalen Walker fan than me. I finalized his grade a couple days ago, and I am over the moon on that guy.
The film's really fun. I'll never disagree with that.
So, Parker, it's interesting because you had mentioned that there were some problems with the Bengals at safety, but you did not mention Nick Emmanwori, Malachi Starks, or Xavier Watts in round one. So what are your thoughts on those three players? And then add a layer to, do they help the Bengals?
Yeah, no, I think if the Bengals find like a Starks or an Emmanwori, I think that's a great situation for them. I think that's a definite value add. I again just think, if I'm the Bengals, I'm swinging on defensive line early. I don't think I want to invest another first round into a defensive back. They have a lot of draft capital invested there. I'd like to develop that. I think again, Xavier Watts later. I think Kaiser and Watts need to be Bengals. If I am going into the draft room and I'm pounding the table for anything, it's that no matter what happens in this draft, come out of it with Kaiser and Watts when you're bringing in Golden. Those are very two key pieces to that defense. And I think you can really ramp up what this defense looks like. You're just bringing in those two players. You're already going to be familiar. But I'd love the ads of Emmanwori or Starks. I don't think either makes it to 17 that they're at the rate that we're going right now. I think they're both, moving up. I think people are lower on Starks than I think some NFL teams are going to be. I think he's got a couple really nice fits before 17. But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed. Same thing goes with corner. I mean, a lot of guys, like taking Will Johnson or even like a Siobhan Ravel or Benjamin Morrison, like Jade Barron, like they like taking DBs at 17. I'm all in on. I think all three of these first 3-round picks need to be in the trenches and on the interior, preferably. But I can see an edge slipping in there too. But I think that's where they need to invest early on.
So here's my hot take, and I realize this is not hot at all. But my favorite drafts are going to be the teams that take at least 2 linemen in the first 3 rounds.
I'm telling you, it's the secret sauce. You take 2 linemen in the first 3 rounds every single year. Every single year.
Howie Roseman. Yep.
Yeah, and I think it was Andy that talked about the Jade Barron fit in the chat with Mike Hilton leaving. So I think Barron is probably the only DB that, and Will Johnson, if he slips that far, should be the only ones in that conversation. I agree with Parker that I think that the resources should be going to the trenches with how much they've poured into the secondary. But if you were going to go secondary, I think Will Johnson and Barron make the most sense there. I would have a really hard time with Ravel at 17. That would be tough for me to spin, even if the medicals are clean. But as far as the safety debate goes, yeah, you're probably not going to find somebody higher on him and worry than me. I've been screaming that dude from the rooftops for weeks now, or probably close to months. I love him and worry. But I think, that's something, again, that Parker nailed that I don't think people are taking into account. Like Daniel Jeremiah had Starks at 32 in his last mock. And I don't think either one of those safeties are going to fall nearly as far as people do.
I think the Dolphins take one of them for sure.
I
could really see Starks. There's some Jalen Travis love. We always love to see that. Love it, Sam.
Yes. So, Sam, if you didn't know, these 2 guys here love Jalen Travis.
We love Jalen Travis.
I got a mention sitting in my notifications right now about if I've watched
that podcast and he knew to poke you, or if that was just luck.
Oh, I love Jalen Travis. My God. The more I think about him, the higher I get on his profile. I need this draft to come so Jalen Travis doesn't end up in my, first 3 rounds.
Also, you want to talk about a combine riser. Holy hell. Again, not an online podcast.
I told y'all.
35-inch vert.
Truth.
Goodness.
You can see it on film.
Yeah.
Let's pause for a quick commercial. We do have a couple of new people in the chat. So, Drew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Let them know how they can find you.
For sure. Yeah, I'm Drew, or at Iron City Film on Twitter, which is where I post pretty much all of my stuff, all the scouting reports, cut-ups, always coming out on there. I just recently started doing some writing for Stadium Rent, who we have a mock draft coming up with on Friday, I believe. So you can check out. I had my first article get published yesterday over there. So you can go check that out. Hopefully I'll have some more coming out soon. I'll try to keep a steady stream of those going. But yeah, just some writing on there, some scouting reports and cut-ups, and always ball talk 24/7 on the Twitter and whatever I do here.
Awesome. And Parker.
So I'm just Sam's comments are really just lighting my evening up, Jim. They're just really. He's actually bigger than Deion Walker. Stood next to him both. They feel nowhere near the same size. You can go follow me on X at ParkerBlake60. I post everything I do there, whether it's articles, podcasts, my own content. It all goes there. It all filters through there. I'm trying to make a TikTok. I'm trying to work the YouTube thing. We're working all these different avenues, but I feel confident in either of those things. So just go to the X for now. Find all my stuff there. I'll post it all there if it's worth posting. You can also subscribe to me on there. That's where I'm doing a bulk of my more in-depth draft content. I have a bunch of huge plans for this next cycle. I'm kind of shifting away from the Bengals focus that my page was the last couple of years and kind of trying to go full draft this cycle. So I'll start I'm going to start posting 2026 stuff probably in the next couple of weeks for my subscribers as far as kind of early looks. And then I'll start getting into articles and figuring out where those are going to end up going on some website, I'm sure. But that's where you find me. Just go to my X, follow me there, and then feel free to DM me. My DMs are always open. I'm here to talk ball. Hop in my mentions, ask me questions. Like I said, I mentioned that I bookmarked, so I made sure to get back to it tonight, asking me if I'd watched Jalen Travis yet, because I was not in a place where I could, appropriately respond. I didn't want to give like a quick like, oh yeah, I've watched him. I want to make sure I give him the
like a 3-paragraph
he
answer.
deserves. You know, I'm gonna maximize this tweet count, this word count for sure. We're gonna put some work in. But yeah, no, hit me up. Go follow me. Feel free to subscribe if you're feeling courteous. It helps me stay motivated to keep banging out content and moving along the train. But yeah, that's where you can go find me. Parker Blake 60. It's right there, actually, just right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you got to make sure you get the hand moving. It's like the opposite. So yeah. So you can follow the channel at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It is the same handle on YouTube as it is on X and Twitter. We have daily draft content. This is the second podcast we've done today. These guys like Shamar Stewart over Nick Scourton. The other podcast like Scourton over Stewart. Like,
we need to have a battle of the podcasts.
We really do.
Tuesdays.
Crazy here at the draft.
And Parker have to be in one seed in that tournament.
And we do 2 podcasts a day. Parker and Drew are the only ones. Like, this is like the late show, right? Like
Parker and Drew after dark. Yeah,
exactly. It is. It's
Jalen Travis after dark pretty much every week.
Jalen Travis.
It's definitely dark, and I don't even think I've had dinner.
Crazy.
Oh wait, I did have dinner for the podcast. I already forgot if I had dinner tonight. But
sounds like it's time for second dinner, Jim.
It is. And then, as Drew said, every Friday night we have a 32-team mock draft, 3 rounds. This weekend or this Friday, it's a partnership with Stadium Rant. So that should be a lot of fun. We tend to learn a lot when we do these, because when you have 32 people picking with 32 different boards, like here would be a big question, and I'm fascinated with this every time, is where do the corners go? Because there's a cornerback 3 through 5 tends to be different for a lot of people. So you can kind of see, who's high on who, so to speak.
I'm going to do my very best to go this 1 week without taking Connerly at 35, because it's been like the past 3 mock drafts. I've done that. Yeah. We're going to switch it up this week.
Yep, and we can chat it up. It's usually a good time on Friday nights. So we can do that. Any thoughts, Parker, on like the Bengals draft will be successful if, and then
I'm telling you, man, it's the Bengals draft will be successful if the first 3 picks are all linemen. I'm telling you, like, I feel like fans have been clamoring for it for years. I feel like it's to the point where we complain every offseason, right? I feel like there's 2 offseason topics for Bengals fans, and it's T. Higgins, and it has been for 3 years, and it's offensive line, and now it's turning into defensive line, which it's been the last couple of years. And so I think you need to commit to T. Higgins. You need to commit to turning over both trench rooms, and then just kind of start this new era. Like, you start this new era of the Bengals where we're protecting Joe Burrow, we're getting pressure on passers in the league, we're stopping the run, and we've locked up some of our bigger stars or bigger tools on both sides of the ball for the relative long term. I think that's like what the Bengals need to do to get over the hump and show that they're not the same old Bengals. They're not the Bengals of the 90s. They're not okay with, middling and losing in the playoffs first round every single season. Like, this is the new era. Like, they need to really just lean into this, I think. And that's why I think, again, the first 3 picks being trench players and go and attack free agency, I think that's a successful offseason.
So, Drew, what do you think is a successful Bengals draft?
I think Parker nailed it. I think for a team that's devoted so many resources into building up that secondary, and they've got so many young, talented pieces there, and obviously they've helped keep that offensive core together. I think this is really just a time it's a great draft to do this as well. You just pile trench guys up. You got to build through the trenches. You've built a roster to a point where you can just sit this year and point all of your resources to interior line on both sides of the ball. And I think that's going to make a huge difference in that team, because I think those are 2 areas that obviously don't get talked about nearly enough, but those are massively impactful. If you can swap an Alex Kappa for a Tyler Booker, I mean, that jumps the team's quality up by an immeasurable amount.
Raise the floor of the whole room.
Yeah. So I think if like that what we were talking about earlier, that 2 trench guys in the first 3 rounds, I think that's a huge improvement for the Bengals.
So I would say, like, the Bengals need defense. And this is, again, outside. I probably watch all of like 2 Bengals games every year. But I would say defense because it's kind of like the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen philosophy. You have one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league, with all due respect, Mr. Jalen Hurts. You have one of the 3 best quarterbacks. No matter what you do on offense, your offense is going to be good because you have Joey B. So resources.
Is Jalen Hurts who we're disrespecting with that statement?
What was that?
Is Jalen Hurts who we're disrespecting with that statement? He'd probably be pretty far down on my list. I'm being honest.
Top 3 guy.
I don't know. Like,
apparently, he's borderline for Jim.
Considered the top 5 quarterback. He needs to be. He performs in the clutch. If Eli Manning is a Hall of Fame or in a Hall of Fame conversation, Jalen Hurts needs to be considered a top 5 NFL quarterback for the same reason.
We're about to start a whole new podcast right here.
We are, and this I will legitimately get like horrible DMs about my quarterback list because it's way off of what everybody else's are.
Well, but we can't do the Jalen Hurts thing without David joining us because he is a Philadelphia Eagles reporter. So he has to have Hurts has to have one of his guys like in the room.
Kind of have a representative at the
table.
Have
somebody in his corner. Yeah. Also, did we talk about Alfred Collins tonight? I don't think we have.
I mentioned him.
Did you?
Briefly. Okay. Yep.
Collins in the second feels like it would be a home run for Collins or Alexander in the second feels like it would be a home run for the Bengals.
That's all I'm saying.
Well, so Collins is interesting because I think if I heard Parker say Collins, like he said, he could maybe see Collins at 17, but he would prefer to trade back and get it.
Yeah, right? I mean, he's top end of the second round. Top end of the second round guy, but I definitely, if you trade back into the 20s and defensive line kind of flew off the board early because of the, range, then you go get him in the 20s and you feel pretty good about that. He's a violent run defender, man.
Yeah, I just feel like Collins is tough because, are you getting really any pass rushing upside with Collins? No. So do you hate to take a player that one dimensional or that a role player in the first round? Maybe, but at the same time, with his ability in run defense and the kind of power he brings there, this guy's going to be in the league for 15 years. So how high of a pick is that worth to get a guy who's going to be
you can turn that profile into such a good pocket pusher, I think, relatively easily. Sure. Like, again, you don't need to be winning your reps. I know that looks cool on all the PFF stats, but if you're able to just generate some pressure in a quarterback's lap, that's all you really need. Especially if you're able to get some volume off the edge, whether it's Hendrickson or Murphy or whoever it might be. Like, I just think that's all they really need is they need to start flushing quarterbacks out of the back of pockets.
Yep. So, Dana, Parker's comment on the DBs was that Cincinnati has invested a lot of draft capital into their defensive backs. So Parker's suggestion is to pivot that and focus on the lines. So
a better pass rush is going to improve the Bengals secondary. I think Bengals fans, they want to just keep investing in the defensive back end. You have high-level athletes and you have good talent back there, but you're letting these quarterbacks just sit back there and pick you apart. So start putting these quarterbacks under pressure. And I think, you've seen the flashes in preseason. I know you've watched them, but these DBs, they have 9 ball hawks back there. And they're all young. They're all on rookie deals the relevant ones that I'm thinking about. They're all on rookie deals and they all have a knack of finding the ball. They have great ball skills. Just get pressure on quarterbacks and slow down run games. And all of a sudden you're going to allow these guys to kind of play a little bit more loose and go attack the ball and go make some plays on the back end. I think we could really see a resurgence of the Bengals defenses that help them make deep playoff runs.
Yep. And one of the other things I want to point out with Alfred Collins, and it was almost the exact same conversation when we did the Bills episode an hour and a half ago. I don't want to take Alfred Collins at 30, but if we trade back, we can take him at 40. The same way that you said, I don't want to take him at 17, but we'll trade back and we'll take him at 25.
Yeah.
So it's funny that nobody wants to take Alfred Collins where they're drafting, but we'll trade back and we'll get Collins.
Well, I think he's just in that weird bucket of he's a fringe top 40 player, but if you wait until the back end of the second round, he's going to be gone.
Yep.
And so it's you're trying to find the sweet spot for value. But it's if you trade back out of 17, You get down to 25, maybe you trade back again. You've collected a couple picks. Now you've gone from 6 picks to 8 picks in this draft, and you snag an Alfred Collins. That's a net win. That's a huge win in my eyes. Where it's like, yeah, you didn't need that pick at 17. Double back a couple times, and then go get an Alfred Collins, even if it is at like 37 or whatever, early in the second round, like early in the second round, and you could be happy with that. And now you have more ammo to keep investing and go get more pieces for your struggling defense.
So Joshua Farmer. So my basic assessment is that he is between 75 and 125 on most boards. Drew, how high do you have Joshua Farmer?
That's a really interesting question. I'm really glad you brought that up. Farmer is somebody that I think there's a massive variance on. I think some people have Farmer just super, super low because he just hasn't been a big name throughout this whole draft cycle for whatever reaon. But I have Farmer above TJ Sanders. I have Farmer. He'll probably end up cracking my top 75. He's around there. He'll be fringe. I don't have everything set yet, but he's around there. Farmer is one of the only guys in the area that he's going to go that has a true like super high ceiling. Now Farmer is about as raw as you're going to get. Like this dude's floor is low, so I won't be surprised if Parker is also very, very low on him. Because there's really no technical refinement there with Farmer. He's incredibly raw. Not a lot of production there, which again I don't really care about, which I guess is why I'm higher on him. But athletes on the level that Farmer is do not come around often. I mean, that guy is what is it, 340, something like that. I forget the measurements right off the top of my head. With like 35-inch arms, and the testing and the short area quickness on him is freaky for the level of athlete that he is. So I think Farmer is a guy that you're getting in the third that is probably not going to be an immediate contributor. But he's such a freak athlete, and the ceiling is so high. I don't feel like you can let him fall out of the top, 80 to 100.
I have 6'3", 318 on ESPN, Drew.
Okay, yeah, I'd be interested to see.
Okay. So Parker, what do you have on Josh?
Because I've seen measurements all over the place with him.
Well, you guys are familiar enough with my evaluation process that I can ask this question, but which specific bucket do you think Josh Farmer ended up in for me?
I'm going to go with
that's the player that he's in the category of he has traits, which is your
fourth round
bucket, right?
Yeah, Parker? fourth round bucket. Because this guy, he's a fun pass rusher to watch. But there are times where I feel like he is a liability in the run game, where he's not only not helping, but he is hurting your defense as a whole with what he's doing as a run stuffer or just a run defender. And again, it's that variance that always freaks me out, and it lands you in the fourth round bucket, where it's like, I love what you bring, I love what you could be, but I have no idea what you're going to be for me, even in preseason game one. I don't know what you're going to be for me in joint practices. Like, I don't even know what you're actually bringing to our team, but that's the swing you love to take on, in the fourth round. But he is not going a step higher. I think he'll probably be outside of my top 100, but like you said, I don't think he'll be too far out of the 125 range. But I just, again, the upside's really fun. It was fun. It's been fun to watch his film and watch him work, but it's just, you just have no idea what his floor is at all. Like, I feel like he's got a more questionable floor than Mykel Williams. Like, I
fully agree with that. The floor is like all the way down with Farmer. Yeah, I just searched that up over here. I was way off on the weight, but I did get the 35-inch arms right, which is the part I really care about anyway.
Just insane, dude. Just insane.
Free frame, dude. And the movement skills he has in that frame are absurd.
If you can give him like a pass rush plan, you can give him a toolbox as a pass rusher, I think you try and cut him down to like a 280 and you bump him out on the edge and just have him be just a monster.
Have him be like a Shamar Stewart light and just.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. If you can get a Shamar Stewart and a Josh Farmer in this draft, like you're going to have
on the outside, you're just going to kill
some real fun projections down the road. Like if you need a D line, that's two swings you can take. Again, take it on day one for Stewart and then take a day 3 swinger on Farmer. And you could have a really fun edge room here in 2-3 years.
So you're suggesting that Farmer's athletic profile could move him to edge if he dropped a little bit of weight?
I think if you have a plan. I mean, again, if you can get them both to play at 280 and move like they move, I mean, I think that's every down esque. Like you can leave those guys in and they can bring you something on every single down that they play.
Got it.
Hopefully.
Well,
who knows?
We've been going for an hour. This has actually been quite good. Very active chat. So, Velox, what did you miss? Whoops, wait a second. There we go. What did you miss? Well, we just went through the Bengals round 1 and 2, and we talked about defensive tackles. We talked about interior offensive line, a little bit of safety. We had some tight end slander that kicked it all off.
I hate Mason Taylor.
It was good stuff. It was good stuff. But for the 42 podcasters at the Draft Professor, for Drew, for Parker, for myself, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody.